Welcome back to 8 Cubes, the show with KM Best and Lamby series, while we discuss the most important topics in Marvel Snap. And we're going to start with two top tier decks that we think are going to survive through the January 9th patch. And the first one of those is Thanos Blob. Lamby, you came to prominence as the Thanos guy. Hit me with your thoughts on Thanos Blob right now. How reliant on Blob is it? And how much will, the fact that Loki might decrease in play rate make it a better deck?
Yeah, so I really think Thanos is like a deck that's like super evergreen. Like it's never completely gone, right? Like in every meta, even when it's not the most popular, it somehow creeps back into like top eights of tournaments and stuff like that. The deck is always there. And now that with the blob in the deck, Thanos has like been the best it's been in a long time because Thanos just incentivizes blob so much. Like Thanos, like with the extra 6 cards in your deck, firstly, you draw less, you have less likelihood of drawing all your big cards. In fact, you draw even after drawing like everything, you still have more cards in your deck than your opponent. So Blob is just very, very big in the Thanos deck. And it's literally doing like Blob now is literally like you play everything and then on the final turn the Blob will win that one lane that you have
Yep.
nothing in. Like that's just Blob in Thanos right now, like almost every time. So I think Blob is pretty much staple in all Thanos decks, like all kinds of like ramp or lockjaw Thanos decks. Blob is just perfect right now. On a note of like Loki possibly being worse and less played, that also benefits Thanos greatly, right? Because Loki's like, okay, I would say Thanos's worst enemy right now in terms of like
Yeah.
counters is the Loki deck. So with the collector potentially being like worse, and then which means Loki might be worse, and then means Loki's play rate drops a little bit, then Thanos has more time to shine because there are less like matchups where it like just loses. In fact, there really isn't any matchup that it just loses outside of like the Loki matchup.
I will say that Thanos is a deck that when I play it, it feels like I am constantly putting myself in 50-50s on like
50-50.
blob locations. I don't particularly enjoy like the blob iteration of Thanos the way I enjoyed like the other iterations of Thanos, like what you call jail Thanos. Like it's
Yeah.
less like the current one is very like, all right, well, let's just see if this works. And I think that's fine, but hopefully they can, do a little bit to push other versions of Thanos back into the spotlight, because it is interesting that as soon as Professor X got nerfed, we just went back to Lockjaw. It's like, okay, we're
Like the
only
top
doing
two.
two things in this archetype. One is cheating energy and the other is stealing lanes. And that's the only thing we actually do here. So I do think that they're actually, paradoxically, I know a bunch of Thanos players are going to get mad at me for this, but like you look back at the Soulstone nerf and it's like, you know what? I think they were right about that. I think they were right to keep an eye on Thanos as an archetype because it is consistently a home for things people hate about Marvel Snap. It is either cheating energy with Lockjaw Quinjet, shout out to old Quinjet, or it is stealing lanes with Professor X, and sometimes it's doing both. And I think that that is probably like actually, yeah, no, that's an archetype worth keeping an eye on, despite the fact that I am, a fan of playing the deck myself a lot of the time. I do think that they're probably going to have to keep an eye on it. And I don't know what they're supposed to do about Blob that won't kill him in other archetypes to make him bad in Thanos, because I've seen suggestions where it's like, oh, he only eats like the first 4 cards of your deck. And it's like, I guess that would work, but that seems very brute force. And it also seems like
Yeah.
very much changing a card that has found a defined role and then saying it doesn't do that anymore, right? Like, this is a deck that has used Blob for very specific things. Blob has been purchased from the store to do those specific things. I would feel some type of way if they just made it so it's like, oh, this doesn't work in Thanos anymore. It's sort of why I don't exactly love the leaked Loki changes, where it's like, oh, this doesn't work with Quinjet anymore. Oh, this doesn't work with Collector anymore. I just feel like people bought it for that reason. They picked it up for that reason, and that should be honored in some way rather than just changing it entirely the way they did with Mobius. The other deck that's going to make it through these next round of nerfs and buffs is Black Knight. And to my mind, Black Knight has now found a place in the metagame as the preeminent Zabu deck. And that's not necessarily because it is like the best or the most consistent Zabu deck. It's because it matches up the best into what you're going to see. Black Knight's giant unkillable Ebony Blade is obviously giant and unkillable, whereas when you compare to something like Leech Hawk, you end up with a very killable Darkhawk that dies not only to Enchantress and Shang-Chi, but also to the card Blob. And when you realize that the 5-cost slot in the Ebony Blade deck is variable, right? It doesn't have to be Sarah, it can be Legion, it can be Leech. It can fill all the things that the other Zabu decks are trying to do as well, and it does so while being impossible to interact with giant stats. You can start to understand why it has become a little bit more prominent. Now, the other reason it has become a little bit more prominent is because it does not have stuff that Enchantress and Rogue are very good against, and this metagame has become very pushed towards Enchantress and Rogue. And it does, on the other hand, have stuff that Mobius is good against, so you end up swapping out that 5-drop Sarah for something like Leech, for something like Legion, and ending up becoming a bit more of just a normal mid-range curve-out deck, which you are allowed to do because it's impossible to interact with your stats off of the Ebony Blade, and so you don't have to rely on dumping them all on the board on the final turn of the game. This is a dangerous deck. I do think it's one of the 4 best decks in the game. I don't think it's the best deck in the game, but it's probably worth respecting, and I think it has, because of the way the metagame has moved, become better than the other decks in its niche over the course of the past week.
Yeah, to me, this deck is okay. So the Black Knight High Roll is one thing. It's like nigh unbeatable most of the time. I do think you're right on the Mobius and Sarah thing, which is like the Sarah actually makes the deck lose sometimes. Like if they play Sarah and then you play Mobius and then they just like waste turn 5, right? Effectively, they can't go like 3+3 with like the Ebony Blade and Ghost Rider, that kind of thing without Zabu, for example. But yeah, so I feel like this deck at its core, like you mentioned, like we all know by now, it's just a good Zabu Miss Marvel deck. Like, actually, honestly, all the decks in the game right now, if the top decks in the game, you're either Thanos or you're a good Zabu Miss Marvel deck. Like, Loki is a good Zabu Miss Marvel deck as well. So, like, I feel like this deck fits that dynamic as well. I do agree that, like, I think this deck is okay. I guess it survives the nerfs, yeah. It should survive the nerfs. To what extent, I'm not sure. This deck also still allows post-nerf Miss Marvel to do her work pretty well. So I do think, yeah, it's tier 1 right now, but definitely not best of the best, because I feel like at the end of the day, any shell with Zabu Miss Marvel can flourish right now, you know?
Yeah, I do think this is likely the best one in the niche of, like, you know,
Like Darkhawk stuff, right?
like in the Darkhawk niche, right? Like it's basically
Yes.
in that same zone, right? I do think it's probably the best one, but a lot of that is because, you know, Blob exists, and like the various counterplay to Darkhawk is at an all-time high, and Mobius is running around and things like that. So like it's not like a permanent state of affairs is what I'm getting at here. It's a contextual thing that is pushing Black Knight above the others right now, and I'm not sure how long that is going to last. Another deck that we think might survive the nerfs despite getting nerfed is Anihilist. I have been an Anihilist bounce truther for forever now. Of the decks that I have in my top 4, it is the only one that is not a Zabu, Miss Marvel, or Thanos deck. And I think that that is a testament to the power of Anihilist himself and of course, the bounce shell generally that works so well with him. Anihilist is a card that, in my opinion, absolutely does deserve to get nerfed. I'm just sad because I've been like an Anihilist abuser for so long at this point. Like, the second he came out, I put him in the good shell, and then it's just been that shell ever since, right? The second he came out, I was like, we're playing him with Hood and Sentry in the bounce shell. And ever since then, that has been wildly successful in a variety of forms. There was the hybridization with Darkhawk. There was the overly teched version, which actually does play Zabu, but can't play Miss Marvel because you're a bounce deck. I've seen some, you know, Zabu Miss Marvel builds of Anihilist. I can't argue against that because Zabu Miss Marvel is very, very strong. But I think Anihilist is so strong that it might live through this nerf. And I am just like, when you look at what a curve like Sentry Anihilist does compared to a card like Hobgoblin, it's very easy for me to be like, okay, yeah, this is actually kind of ridiculous still, right? It's still just so strong. What are your thoughts on Anihilist going forward after he is nerfed to potentially a 5/5?
Yeah, I'm relatively sure this deck will survive the nerfs for a few reasons as well. Like, recently, even before like the nerfs, right? Like recently, I've been playing against like a lot of Annihilist stuff. And because Destroy is non-existent in the meta right now, Annihilist just has free reign. Like literally just like sending hoods and like the inevitability of maybe sending hood and the void over, plus with the bounce stuff you get like multiple 1/6 demons. Like many games, right? It's just literally sentry on 4, Annihilist on 5. Then you realize you can't beat demons and stuff that are played on turn 6 because you have other stuff that is clogging your board. Like we are not even really talking about like full clock, by the way. We're just talking about like partially clocked with negative stats. Like I'm even starting to see Seline in a bit of a new light right now sometimes, because like being able to send over this, it doesn't even have to be a -6 like code, like -2 power forge is like a thing as well. Yeah, I'm even starting to see it in a new light, because like it's one less board space, right? And one less board space means like literally one less space for the blob, one less space for something big on their side of the board. Like it's really because like destroy is out of the meta. Any negative power is like, it's like you are playing 1/6s. They are getting 1 -2s, 1 -1s. Like just card for card, your space is way more well utilized, right? So I think like this is like still something potentially threatening going forward, because like I don't think like not being able to play Annihilus with Debris was ever an issue.
Correct.
Right? So I think even if the Nihilus is a 5/5, if you look at it from like a grand scheme, like in the grand scheme of things, it's like it's a 5/5 that sends over a -3, a -10. If you play Seline, it sends over a -1 and whatever else you Seline. So like it's not a 5/5. It's not a 5/7. It's like maybe 5/20.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yeah, he goes from like a
potentially.
5/22 to a 5/20, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
it's
yeah, that's
not
pretty good.
bad.
Yeah.
So I actually have like, and plus now there's Quake, right? I'm not saying that like you always play Quake in this deck, but like Quake adds a dimension of like flipping locations and like sending your negative stuff into certain even more negative locations, you know, if you think about it
Yeah.
that way.
I'm about to send that void to the Nexus. You know what I mean? Or I should say, I'm
Yeah.
about to send that Nexus to the void. Like
Yeah.
that is
Or you could send like the void to that -2 location or -3 location, which is crazy as well, right? Or send it into
or you could send all your shitty little 1-drops to that negative location and then send
Oh
it over to
yeah.
them. Like there's
It's like
so
a
many
juke.
things. Yes. There's so many
Yeah.
things that like a mid-range shell can do with the card Quake, and
in
Anihilist is
every
definitely
deck,
that.
man.
Yeah, Quake is going to be ridiculous. Speaking of a card that is probably not going to be ridiculous, Hercules 4/6. When a card moves to its location the first time, it gets moved out. I asked Lamby about this card before the podcast started, and he was like, yeah, I'm very sure this card is going to be bad. And I am also very sure this card is going to be bad. Lamby, tell me why you're very sure this card is going to be bad.
Firstly, it's too expensive. It's a 4/6. Yeah, I mean, you can argue that Zawu makes it a 3/6. But the thing is, there's so much setup to this card, right? Like, I mean, I've been wrong about cards before, but like this one, I don't think so. Because like, it's so much setup, and you have to basically what Hercules does is that like anything that goes into this location bounces out, right? That's it. But like that means that you need like a whole deck to work around these kind of stuffs. You really also need your opponent to be playing a move deck. Like how often is that gonna happen as well? And even if they're playing a move deck, it's not exactly bad. So like it's just moving stuff out, right? So I don't really see the draw of this card right now. Maybe with the like proposed changes to like Kingpin or something,
Yeah.
you know, you could make something work. But it feels like it's a lot of build around. And I don't want to say it is like the most horrible card that has come out in a while, but I don't really see a use case for this. Like maybe there's a way to make a deck, a way to make like a move style negative affliction whatever kind of deck, but I currently can't grasp the concept of it.
I think if he were a 3/4, you could talk me into him. Like, not that he'd be good, but that like the all-in move decks would play him, right? Like if he were a 3/4, it would be like, okay, this is your 3-drop, and then you like Iron Fist of Vulture in there. And it's like, okay, that's a lot of power. That's actually just a lot of power. And then you have your whole turn 5 to do stuff with that too, right? And your whole turn 5, your whole turn 6, you can now you like if you had 3 turns with this guy instead of 2 turns.
Oh, sorry, I get it now. This is the same problem as the 2099 problem, right? It's too
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah. It's just too expensive. Like if you had more turns to work with this guy, I feel like he could have been an actual card that's actually
Oh,
good.
100%, 100%.
But you only have those 2 turns to work with him unless you're investing in Zabu in your move deck. And if you're investing in
Weird.
Zabu in your move deck, why not just play one of the better Zabu decks?
Yep.
And it's like, then you're also giving up your turn 2 because your turn 2 has to be Zabu now. And it's just like, it's a whole thing where it's like, I don't think the design of this card is unworkable. I think the cost of this card is unworkable, not the like fundamental things going on with it. Like it could be a fine card, but you need more time with your enablers if you're trying to get a lot of different things to happen with Hercules. You just need time for that to happen. And right now, he's not giving you enough.
Yeah, I really think you hit the nail on the head when you said like the cost is the issue. And then I suddenly had this epiphany about the 2099 thing, which is the same because like Spider-Man 2099, if it was a 3 cost or like 3/4, I would really see some use case for it because you get 1 extra turn to use this kind of effect, right? These kind of effects, the more you get to use it, like the better. Or like the earlier you get to like set it up, the better, right? This kind of effects. And at 4, I think in a deck like Move or like in a Move Shell, like it's not even the most popular thing ever. It's not even the best thing to do ever already. And they add like this card, which is a bit too expensive to make the deck better. So I feel like, yeah, hopefully, I don't know. This is the card's not even released yet, but I'm already calling for a rework to 3 costs.
Let's talk about something that's grinding my gears, and it's people calling High Evo overpowered. I could not think of a bigger tell that you don't know what you're talking about than saying High Evolutionary She-Not is overpowered. It is the most mid deck in the entirety of Marvel Snap. It is a fine deck. It's been on my tier list. It's fine, but it is at best like the 6th or 7th best thing you can be doing. It is absolutely a deck that is it is 100% fine, but the idea that it is an issue, that it is too strong, that it is actually anything is ridiculous. It has like the most available counterplay of any deck ever. You literally just don't have you literally the only thing you have to worry about from that entire deck is the card Leech. That's it. And it's hardly the only deck playing Leech at this point. It is an incredibly beatable and fair deck. It is one of the most fair and balanced decks in the entire game, and that's not a compliment because you don't want to be playing fair stuff. Deck's fine, very defined ways to beat it, i.e., play your Legion or your Snowguard Hawk on turn 5 instead of turn 6 if you're afraid of Leech. Stop getting greedy about it. Just do the play that actually wins the game, and then you won't be so sad when your cards get leeched. And then stop staying when your cards get leeched and you would lose to them playing a She-Not and some other big guy on the final 7th turn of the game. And if you follow those rules, this deck is absolutely not a problem. And it actually just kills me to see people calling a deck that is, I don't know, fine, a like meta tyrant. It is blowing my entire little mind.
Okay, so I know where this is going and I know why this is going this way as well. I'm quite sure. So for context, right? High Evolutionary She-Not is the one deck that I pray to God to see on my ladder climb. Like I want to play against this deck for a few reasons, which is also the reason why I think people think it's a meta tyrant, which it is not, by the way. Firstly, I feel like High Evo She-Not does the same thing almost every game and wants to do the same thing almost every. Like, it actually wants to do the same thing almost every single game with as little variation as possible, right? Which is you 1-cost cards, you float, you magic, you Cyclops, you Leech, you float, you She-Hulk, Infinite, blah, blah, blah. Like, you want this to happen every single time. But the thing is, people find it a meta tyrant because they think it's hard to counter, but I think they just don't realize how to counter it. Like KM Best has been mentioning, which is like you go and lead, you play your Snowguard Hawk on 5, you dodge the Leech, you spread, you don't play all your stuff into the potential Cyclops lane, you just count the float that the Sunspot will have, and then you count the She-Hulk and then the like what all that kind of stuff. Like it's accountable. It's very accountable levels of stats. You kind of just know what's their max a lot of the time. The only thing that's a bit up in the air is like maybe Hulk's actual stats. That might be a bit up in the
You
air.
always just assume that Hulk is like there are a couple situations, right? Like you end up in two situations against the deck, right? The first is make sure you're a She-Hulk bigger or bigger than a She-Hulk in every lane, or make sure you're bigger than an Infinite in 2 lanes, right? Like those are pretty much the 2 situations you end up with against the deck.
Yeah, I'm not saying that like you can never lose to this deck. I can lose to this deck. You do sometimes lose to this deck, but then you know when you lose, right?
Yes.
You know. Like, actually, retreating when you know that you lose to a deck is not a loss. It's you just don't win the game and you don't give them the pleasure of taking more than one cube from you. That is a win, by the way, because you know you can't beat them. They will want you to stay, but you don't. So like infinite She-Hulk decks are Evo decks are very clear cut and face up. I feel like once like maybe okay, I'm probably gonna do a thread on this, but like as long as people know the way the deck plays, like your win rate against the deck will just skyrocket. Like you just know because like they don't have anything better to do. They always want to do the same thing.
Yep.
And yeah, if you know what's up, you probably can beat the deck or retreat.
I also will say, I think a lot of people complaining about it are just like complaining because they see it a lot. And
True.
that is actually a compliment to what Second Dinner has done with the Chimera box, because it basically just gives you the She-Not deck out of the box, right? You get Chimera, you get Nebula, you get High Evo. Those are the expensive cards in the deck. You now have basically the entire deck if you have that plus Series 3. So, like, you could be, like, collection level 1500 and run into a fully powered She-Not. And that, I think, is actually, like, the kind of situation where you would complain about a She-Not.
That's
But
true.
I also think they should keep doing that. They need to do more things where they just put an entire deck into the boxes. I think that's a really, really good idea. I don't know if they did it by accident, but if they did, take note. It's very cool and good that you did this. It's so good, in fact, that you have people complaining about like the 6th best deck in the metagame. Like that's an incredible testament to just how powerful card availability can impact the metagame. Lamby, you've become something of a Ronin truther, haven't you? Like you're a bit of a Ronin guy now. Tell me about your newfound love for Ronan the Accuser.
Okay, so this stems from my newfound love for the card Maximus. Well, it's not really a newfound love for the card Maximus. I always liked it when it was 3/7. I love stats. Like this is gonna be a ever present thing in like my conversations and deck building. But I love stats. 2/6 Maximus is amazing. You really see it more in Sarah decks and like obviously like Miss Marvel Miss Marvel Ronan Maximus stuff. But on to Ronan. So what I realized about Ronan that I kind of knew this, but like I tested it and I realized like it's actually true, which is the base stats 5/5 Ronan is very, very, very strong. Like I'm not saying I'm not saying that you actually choose to play this without Maximus. Maybe you do, but like even in the games where I don't play my Maximus, my Ronan is struggling to not be a 5/9. Like it's like a 5/9, and if they are not strictly a black knight deck, it's like a 5/13 or 5/11. And if they are a Thanos deck, it's a 5/15. So and none of this involves Maximus at all, by the way. Like the Maximus just gives you the 4 points, yeah, sure. So if it happens, it happens. But Ronan is a card that I feel that the moment they made it a 5/5, by the way, 5/5 is actually like insane versus Enchantress, because when they play Enchantress versus Ronan, it's the same. Like it ties. So like the base 5/5 stats is super important. And it makes me feel like, you know, even if you play like Ramp Sandman and you don't want to play Maximus, Ramp Sandman playing Ronan is huge, right? Because like they only get to play one card a turn, and even if they don't, you cheat it out early, it's like really big. Like strictly outside of playing against a Black Knight or Apocalypse discard deck, which is kind of non-existent right now, the Ronan is generally gonna be 5/9, 11, and on a good day 13, which is like it's like the devil dino you can play in not Thanos decks.
Yeah.
Right. So
And
I
not
think
Loki
Ronan is great. It's a great card. I still don't think I would play it without Maximus, but my point here is that like you can literally play the card on turn 5 and you never draw your Maximus and it probably still wins you a game.
Here's an underrated bit about Ronan is now it's probably big enough to be played without Master Mold too, which is good because Master Mold is not very good, right? So like
Yes.
Ronan is now big enough that it doesn't require its worst support card, which matters because like otherwise you're playing a bad support card. And I think that Ronan, I will say, Sandman Ronan, in the beta, there was 1 week basically where Ronan was 5/0, but he got +3 for every card in hand.
Whoa.
And during that time, I made and wrote about a Sandman Ronan deck way, way, way back in the day. This is like what we do with Sandman. It was like Sandman back when we had Old Wave too. So you had
Sandman, right?
I believe this was 4/1 Sandman, but it might have been after he was like 5/3. I can't remember. I think it was 4/1 Sandman. But the strategy was basically it was actually like kind of a Zola deck, right? Because you'd have like Wave Zola Odin, Old Wave, right? Because it would be like that's your budget Sandman, but you would also have like Sandman Ronan Zola. And so Ronan was just big enough to like
Yeah.
win any lane he was in because he was just like, 18 to 21 power depending on how the game played out. And that is it's very funny to hear you bring that up again because it's like, oh man, I remember that. I remember doing Sandman Ronan, and it's good that he's like not in the power range that he was in at that time, but comparable enough that we could now talk about Sandman Ronan again. I think that's fun. Let's talk about everyone's favorite stat stick, Gladiator. A 3-8 is very, very good. And I've been seeing some comments on my videos that are like, how can you play Gladiator in this meta? And the answer is it's a 3-8. And I think it's a little more complex than that. Like there's a metagame dynamic to address here too. And that dynamic is they have consistently nerfed all the early scalers that would outscale a 3-8. Angela, Bishop, Elsa Bloodstone, Werewolf by Night. All of those have been dealt with. And now we're in a metagame where investing in those early scalers is likely to end up with a lower result than 3-8. So you just play the 3-8 instead. And that is not, my favorite metagame dynamic of all time. It's also part of why Miss Marvel is such a great card right now, is because there's nothing early that's going to outscale her if you invest into it. So you just play the big dork and that's it. Like, I don't think this is a metagame that I particularly love existing in that context, like where it's just, well, let's play big dumb idiots, and then my big dumb idiots are better than your big dumb idiots, because there's no point in investing in, alternate ways of putting power on the board. I hope that changes at some point in the future. I definitely enjoyed Marvel Snap the most when I was investing in those turn 2 hard carries, turn 3 hard carries. That's the kind of Marvel Snap I enjoy playing, but I respect people who enjoy playing just play the biggest guy on curve whenever you can. Marvel Snap, I got nothing against that. And Gladiator is a great card when you're just looking to play the biggest guy on curve whenever you can.
Yeah, funnily enough, you mentioned like turn 2, turn 3 hard carries. I really enjoyed that style of deck the most as well, as you saw. Like I really played a lot of bounce in the bounce meta. I played Silky Smooth with Angela and Kitty. Yeah, I really like scaling hard carries, and like it's really not there anymore, right? Now it's just a Zabu Miss Marvel big stuff meta. And Gladiator, I found myself like, even though I prefer the other style of playing, but like Gladiator has found its way into most of my decks just cause 3-8 very good, right?
Yep.
Like you play a vision for 5-8. All right. Or yes, that has mobility, but this is a 3-8. Like, okay, yes, there's a downside, which is you pull something big, it sticks. I'm not gonna give you the counter argument of yes, Gladiator into Shang-Chi, because that is not exactly very good. Okay, for obvious reasons. But like, I'm not even gonna try and like explain that one. I'm just gonna say that like Marvel Snap allows you to do one thing that other games don't let you. They let you retreat. So like honestly, I play Gladiator on ladder specifically like a very, very big spider ham. So I play it on turn 3, I pull the thing. If it pops, I know what they're playing in their deck, and that specific thing dies, and I know the whole archetype for the most part because you kill a key piece or whatever. If the thing I pull doesn't die, they snap me, well, then you leave for 1, right? It's very simple. And like the thing about this 3-8 worth of stats, that it's super underrated. Like, I mean, at least now anyway, 3-8 plus Miss Marvel is 13.
Yep.
It's 13 stats. It's crazy. Obviously, in the future, you need to add one more thing there to make Miss Marvel work. But still, it's a lot of stats. And like, I feel like the argument of like, there are stuff that you can pull from Thanos that make you lose. Obviously, yes. But then that's where you retreat. And also, statistically, there is still more stuff in the Thanos deck that will explode. 6 stones, Lockjaw, Wave, Kyara, Leech. You get the idea. It's like more than half the deck, or at least like more than half the deck still. So, and outside of that specific matchup, I think like versus the Loki Mirror, Gladiator is insane. Like you pull an early Loki, it flops at the wrong time. You pull the Collector, it dies. You pull Werewolf or one cost, Quinjet, Coulson, collect, and basically anything.
Yeah,
You
but
pull
they
anything
get
except
your Gladiator when they play Loki is the
okay.
issue.
That is
me.
the problem.
Like,
yes,
like,
but
yeah,
like you, I guess my point is that like there's like no downside playing it against Loki like on curve, right? You don't feel the fear.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you guys need to try this out yourself. Like the stigma of like, oh, what if I pull something too big is gonna be there, yes. But you gotta play the card and realize that how many times on turn 6 you realize, whoa, my lane is huge. What did I play there? Gladiator.
Yep.
That's all I put there. Yeah, it's just very big, right? So just play the card and see that realize that it's actually very worth your time.
Yeah, the thing stopping me from playing it in Loki is actually just giving my opponent a 2-8. Like that's
Yeah,
that's
that
the
is a downside. Yeah.
actual
That is the
downside of
downside.
playing it in Loki. Everyone talks about like the other downside of like you're playing the card, but no, it's a 3/8. It's a great card. Giving your opponent a 2/8 is way better though. It's very scary
Yeah.
when your opponent has like 2/8 Gladiator, and then like God forbid they have a Quinjet. Their final turn is like just Gladiator, Rogue, your Miss Marvel, play their Miss Marvel, and just like, oh, that sucked.
I mean, in your words, this dumb guy Loki deck
Yeah,
is just the saddest thing into the mirror. Right?
it's
It's not
so
really the saddest
sad
thing.
because
It's not
everyone
really
is
the
already
saddest thing
doing it.
if both sides are playing the same thing, right? So it's like
Yes.
who gets more dinosaurs that cost 4 or even
Oh,
3 sometimes? Who gets 2 cost Miss Marvels? Yeah, the mirror is a bit tragic. Like it's very
who?
sad. So
It's actually like this is we're segueing into our next topic here. But what I found the mirror is about more than anything else is Rogue.
yeah.
So when I talk about the Loki mirror, like what I'm talking about mostly is like the dynamics of it are basically roguing Miss Marvel and then roguing Mobius and Mobius. Like those are the things that the Loki mirror, the dumb guy Loki deck that I popularized, revolves around right now. And it's a consequence of like how this metagame has been. Like this is titled Rogue OP, but what I'm actually getting at is like Rogue is OP because it steals Miss Marvels, right? Like that's why, right? Like it's like an extreme. It's like a basically you play it. It's 20 stats, right? They lose a Miss Marvel, you get a Miss Marvel. That's incredibly game winning, and it makes Miss Marvel harder to play too because you can't just run her out there. She might get rogued, and you have to like put other ongoings in her lane, and then that means the whole lane might get enchantressed. It's a very like there is some very fun dynamics happening in this metagame, and I think this is one of them. And I
Yeah.
think the fact that Rogue is so constantly showing up in these decks does make me wonder if it is a little bit better than the other ongoing tech cards. That's what I'm getting at here. Because this is a metagame that is very, it wants to be an ongoing relevant metagame, and yet Rogue is the one that is so much better. Rogue is better than Enchantress. Rogue is better than Echo. Rogue is better than Super Scroll. It's by far the best. And I don't know what would have to happen to make that not true because stealing the ability is so damn strong. And I just wanted to highlight just how good Rogue has been for the last few months as an ability thief, as an ongoing counter. Like the only time she was not the literal stone best was when people were playing Living Tribunal and Enchantress was better. And that was like a week. And basically every other situation, Rogue has been the best ongoing counter in the entire game for an
Yeah.
extremely long time. And I just wanted to give her props. She's been doing so much work and she deserves it.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to say I own Jim Lee Rogue. It's my favorite Rogue. Jim Lee Rogue is really nice.
I'm on Mark Brooks
Anyway,
myself.
okay, that's pretty good as well. Yeah, but anyway, so Rogue to me personally is one of the reasons. Okay, firstly we talk about the Thanos, the Loki Mirror. Rogue is one of the reasons why I can like sort of get away with not playing my own Mobius because like the moment they know that it's a mirror, they play the Mobius on 3, and then I have a target for my Rogue. That's one other thing other than Miss Marvel as well. But yeah, no, I think Rogue is just flexible, right? Because 3
Yeah.
costs, it's really just 3 costs. It's so flexible. You can play it into like Zabu Miss Marvel. You can play it. It's one of the reasons why I feel like Iron Man is such a horrible card to play right now. And like I play against some Mr. Negative sometimes, and like even Cerebro, like playing against Cerebro 3 is Cerebro 3 is actually supposed to be good versus Loki, but like just having to be able to rogue that gives me an avenue of victory, which is crazy. So I think rogue is just flexible. It's really strong. I do think there is some play around to rogue, which I think you should actively like start doing now, which is it's not an exact play around, which is like the whole thing whereby you stack 2 ongoings in the same location, right? Like your Zabu and your Miss Marvel in the same location, and you make them play the 50-50 on the final turn or
Yep.
something like that. It's scary for them, it's also scary for you, but you know like that's an out. Like that's an out that doesn't involve like dropping initiative because sometimes you just really can't because you need to play cards, right?
Yep.
So like instead of just purposely trying to not play cards, which is like generally a losing recipe unless you're a Sarah deck. So you just play double or triple ongoings in the same lane. Like I did once hilarious one. I did like rogue on an Iron Man. I played like my Quinjet there, and then I played like the Loki Iron Man in the same location. I'm like, come at me, bro, choose one. That kind of thing. So yeah, like I'm not saying that's the exact pan out that you gotta do, but like Rogue has counterplay.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's like my favorite ongoing stealer effector ever.
She's so
Like
good.
Yeah, like Enchantress was really only there because Tribunal, you needed to hit everything, not just one. But
Mhm.
like I really think Rogue in the metas going forward will still be an ever-present force. I mean, of course, as long as there are ongoing cards. And clearly, in my opinion, Miss Marvel being changed for the next patch wouldn't make her disappear. So Rogue will still be relevant.
Yeah, and I think this is time for me to reiterate my long-standing call of, can we get Enchantress back to 4/6, please? Like, come on,
Why not?
just make her a 4/6 again. Like, what? Who's it gonna hurt? We're in this situation where like the stat lines on cards like Miss Marvel and Ronin are so high as base before their ongoing thing that when you Enchantress them, it's like, all right, well, we just got the same amount of stats on that lane.
Enchantress now ties Ronan is
Yeah.
hilarious.
And it's like, okay, can we just like help her out a little bit? Damn. Like, you've been helping out the base stat lines of these ongoing cards, but you haven't done anything for Enchantress. It's like, oh man, I really want her to. It's like when you were Enchantressing a Darkhawk all the way back down to 0 power, then it was awesome. But now you're not doing that anymore. You're Enchantressing stuff to 5
To
power.
base states,
Yeah,
yes, to base
give her some
stats.
extra stats. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. There will be a little bit of a break in these episodes here. Lamby is going to go on vacation. I'm looking for a guest host for my next episode, but that does mean that the midweek episode of the show will not actually be out on Lamby's channel, unfortunately. There will be an episode a week from now on my channel, and then we'll be back on the normal schedule once he is back. Everyone wish Lamby Series a great vacation, and I will see you in the next one. Lamby, take us out.
Thank you guys. I'm gonna enjoy my vacation. And so if you like what you just heard and saw, do like, follow, subscribe, comment below. We will see you guys very, very soon. Bye bye.